Okay, call this meeting to order at 10:30, Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. For further pay matrix consideration, this was partly my idea, so I guess I'll just start. Do you have a spare pen?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm used to Timmy having a cup full.
I didn't bring pen, paper.
You're not doing any
nothing
notes
today.
today, are you?
Nothing.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you why I wanted to have the meeting, and then we'll discuss it and decide if we're going to do anything about it or not. Last week we voted on a temporary new acceptance of a new matrix in lieu of having a wage study from the clerk's office as per statements from the clerk, and asked at that meeting several times if in fact we were giving about an average 1% wage increase, and the answer I got back clearly was that yes, we were giving a 1% wage increase, and that also included would be a few folks that had longevity increases, which I counted about 10 or 12 of those that were getting longevity increases. That was repeated multiple times. We were promised that there were no other changes other than that. Our goal was to help the folks who didn't get the raises with the Sheriff's Department and Public Works and solid waste over the last couple of years. The folks that have been left out of those to get an increase to catch up with some of the disparity. And we also recognize, one of the reasons we wanted a wage study is that there were so many disparities, and we wanted to make things more even. So the promise last week was that I voted on was that this was not a new matrix, it was the old matrix, that the only changes we would see would be that 1% increase and the longevity increases. After analyzing the data, which I appreciate, I guess Timmy probably sent that to me, I appreciate that. After analyzing your spreadsheet and looking, and I'm going to tip my hat to Josh, because I believe last week you said in the meeting, why don't you guys wait a week or postpone a little bit. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to delay giving the increase to our folks, but I think I should have listened, because after looking at the data, the average raise was not 1%. We were misinformed on that, misunderstanding, misinformed, whatever you want to call that. The average raise was 5%, which is a significant difference. There were a couple of folks moved up on the chart for non-longevity reasons, which was a concern because we were guaranteeing that we didn't have a new matrix. We were simply taking the old matrix. But a couple of folks were moved up for supervisory or leadership responsibilities to 19 and 20% pay increases. Not 1%, but 19 and 20% pay increases, which I think is a little bit unaffordable at this time. Sends kind of a strange message to the public. The range of raises created more disparity, not less. Instead of giving everybody 1% or 2% or 3%, we have everything from 1.7 to 19.6% increases. Various departments were treated differently, and I'm just going to read these off because it looks like this isn't random. If you looked at the BOCC and our employees on that chart, we averaged about a 3.9% increase. If you looked at the prosecutor's office, you see a 3% increase. The treasurer, 3.7. The assessor, 5.42, and the clerk, 6.07. Almost double. Maybe that's just how it fell out, but it seems to be creating more disparity between the departments if you look at it that direction. Another thing that concerned me was that people sitting in the same office could be getting anywhere from a 2% to a 10% to a 20% raise, and I just think that creates more disparity. I also don't think the county can afford 20% raises at this time. We've talked about that. If we do a wage study, which we have agreed to do a wage study, then we're going to have to come up with the money to fund it. And this already funds a couple of those. After analyzing this, I think the clerk did create a new matrix. I know there's semantics here. I feel that it's an uneven and unfair and that we were misinformed. I think we should be waiting for an outside professional study to do a matrix or make these kind of changes. And I'm just going to suggest that instead that we repeal the matrix. It's too late to change the pay for this month, so that we don't do anything for the paycheck coming out today and tomorrow. But that we then, in its place, just do a flat 3% or a flat 5% increase for all the folks that were affected by this. Give everybody the same increase instead of having them range from 1% to 19%. Again, minus the longevities that would still get their longevity raises, but that's what I'm thinking.
Well, this was never a cost of living raise. I want to make sure that the board understands that. This isn't a cost of living raise. We didn't do I believe what this was supposed to do was catch up other employees that were left far behind. So you can't really do that on a cost of living raise and say everybody gets a 10% raise or everybody gets that. My understanding of this was that there was employees left behind, way behind. So what I would like to do is I would like to know how and why these different employees and what was behind these raises before I would go forward and make a decision. I don't think we should be giving everybody a percentage. I know there was people left behind. So I would like to know on each employee why they got those raises and why it was and who justified it, how that would be justified.
But wouldn't that be creating a new pay matrix?
Yeah, it would.
Which we had agreed we wouldn't do until we
But what
got
we're
the
trying to
study.
do was the whole premise behind this was to catch people, catch this side up and catch the side that did not get the raises over the last, the raises went out before we were in office. And that put a big disparity between the county employees on the clerk side, on the assessor side. The roads department got raises, the sheriff's department got raises, the transfer station, but everybody else was left behind during those years. So that's what this was supposed to be for. But I would like to know more of how they did it and why. I don't think we can do a straight percentage. We had longevity people here for almost 30 years that never got longevity raises. And that was unfair. And so I'd like to know how this all worked out. I don't think a straight percentage is what we were really looking for, because this isn't a cost of living. This was to catch up.
Well, when we voted last week, the clerk made the statement at least 3 times that we were giving about a 1% increase, which did sound like we were giving everybody the same thing. So I may have misunderstood. I thought that is what we were after, was more or less, minus the longevity folks, that we were giving everybody the same basic boost until we could get a wage study to decide. Because as soon as the clerk's office decides that a couple of people should get raises because they're supervisors, we're creating a new matrix. And we had agreed not to do that until we had an outside agency do it.
Okay, I can see that point.
So to me, if we still allow for the longevity increases, but we replaced this system, which seems a little unfair to different departments and a little unfair to different, in other words, the clerk's office is placing people in a matrix that really should be up to the elected or up to the county commission to decide those things.
No, that's one of the. I understand your point, but are these head of these departments? Are they? That would be another question. I mean, were they left behind? Were they head of the department? So why would somebody be ahead of this department making less money than somebody at this head of this department. See, we've got problems, and I think I need more answers than I'm getting right now. Is why, and I'd like to know the why before I make any decisions. And I also think that we should have 3 commissioners in here to be able to vote because of we need to have a full board. So I would consider continuing this matter to a later date so that Commissioner Cassidy can be involved in it as well. But I think I would like to have more information.
Well, to be frank, my concern is I voted for this based on what the clerk said at the last meeting. It now looks like several of the statements made were misinformation or inaccurate, or we had some kind of major misunderstanding, because we heard 3 times that we were doing a 1% average increase, and yet the average is 5%. I'm just concerned that we're sending mixed message. We're in a tight time in the county. We have agreed that we've set money aside in the budget. I think Peggy said 148,000, something like that this would impact.
And we came under what you guys approved for this match.
But a 5% increase would only affect the county by 76,000. So since the matrix the clerk's office does average to 5%, that's why I recommended 5%. 5% would impact the budget about $77,000. I understand your argument. We could wait for our 3rd commissioner. We could do that. One of my concerns was we're already starting to pay folks. Some people are getting 1% or 1.5%, and some people are getting 19 or 20%. Every day we let that go, it becomes harder to withdraw that, because now we look like we're cutting pay.
But if you're bridging a gap, not everybody's going to be in the same area. So when you're bridging a gap, if this person's lower, of course they're going to be up higher. Versus this person that's in the middle, they only get the 2% or the 1%.
I agree with your logic, except that I think that the commissioners and the elected official that employs that person would be the ones making that final decision on what gaps we're bridging, not the clerk's office. And in this case, we didn't have any input into that.
We didn't move anybody on the matrix.
So
They all remained the same.
what we tried to explain before, and when you say that 1%, you had asked if everybody would be getting at least a 1%. Yes, everybody will get at least a 1%, but when you're going from and putting them into one matrix, I took them on their matrix, matched it up to the matrix that is the county matrix that like Ben and them are on, and said they would be here on this matrix, and then I put them in the longevity spot that they should be in.
Have you talked to the clerk regarding this? Have you sat down with the clerk and went over this?
So
Or
it was
Just
never
with
said
the
that it would
deputy.
be a 1%. It was everybody would in that system would go at least a 1%. Nobody would be left behind in this area that had been left behind. They would all get matched up, and like the audit suggested, everybody should be in one matrix and that the pay should be a little closer to even. That's what that outside audit had suggested. So that's what we thought we were trying to accomplish and stay within the levy like you guys had asked. So that's where she was going with that. And when we put them into the matrix, I took the wage that they were making now, put it to that matrix and said, okay, this would be where they would be at, and then I put them into their longevity on that matrix.
Why would the
But
various departments get, I mean, we've got the prosecutor's office only getting 3% raises when the clerk's office is getting 6%.
Like Jerry said, when they made their matrices, they were all
Did you
different.
have, what, we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, at least
6.
5, 6
Six
different matrices. that were totally different than each other. Some were conservative, some were less than conservative. What the clerk was doing was trying to restore it back to the old one.
To just one
To
matrix.
get those 5 equal. So, and I'm making these numbers up, so forgive me. If I went in and said, okay, I'm going to increase my matrix by 4%, and Carrie went in and she increased hers by 10%, and then the clerk went in and changed hers to 25%. To get those equal, I would have, my employees would have to get more to bring them to this.
I understand your.
So that's why some departments are more or less. And then some departments might have, if you had a department like carrying, one person had a increase in longevity, that'd be 33% of her employees. But if you took one person in the clerk's office, that might only be 10% of the employee. So,
Good point.
so it's different size office, different matrices, and those. So, but until that wage study comes in and we can look at that, it's going to be problematic. It's going to be difficult. And I don't think anyone in here wants to be treated more favorable than anyone else. It's just, and Peggy and I, when she went through this, she called me and asked about my employees, why this person was here or there. And most of it had to do with longevity and extra duties they're taking on, because we have a huge transition going on in our office where Carrie doesn't. So
I'm glad to hear she called you.
yeah.
Sheriff, did you have that conversation with the folks affected? Because a few of her folks are on the clerical part of it.
Did you
Okay.
talk to them?
We were told our employees were left off, which would
So,
in turn create another matrix.
because well, they're still on the matrix you guys had. The reason that nothing was done in 1920 or 1923 and 2 was just because they were so far ahead already. That's where those raises, that's the gap that was trying to be closed a little bit, was to make sure that the places that did get left behind because of the different amounts on everything that got closer to all of that, so that people were a little more evened out, is what the attempt was to do with that, so that it wasn't such a big gap between people that have been here the same amount of time doing a similar job or whatever. You know, they're all on the same grade if you stick them on that matrix, but they were so far apart because of the 6 different amounts that's what that was supposed to be doing, was getting those closer.
Okay, well, we may have a major misunderstanding on the 1%. I do recall asking the clerk a couple of times if the basic effect of this was a 1% raise. So I was under the impression we were giving about a 1% raise, because I even argued at one point that maybe that should have been higher. But
And that's why I said is everybody getting at least a 1%?
at
And
least.
I said, yes, it
That's-
was at least a 1%, plus all of the different components with all the different matrices was gonna make all those raises different.
I understand your point.
I'd just like to point out that this does put all of our clerks on their own separate matrix, which in turn does create another matrix. If they're not going on to the matrix that everybody else is going to, then we would have to look at taking them into their own matrix that isn't the old one, because the old one is literally built for hundreds of employees, not for 7 or 8 or 9. It's
Right, that's, definitely a good point. If you wanna put all the clerical onto one, you know, you'd have to look at that.
Okay, well, I'm convinced that we told the public we were doing a 1% raise, so I definitely wanted to get the word out. In fact, didn't that hit the paper yesterday? Yeah, so I want to get that corrected. We need to be honest with the public. it looks like we gave an average of 5%. Okay, you want to wait.
Yeah, I'd like to have more information from the clerk's office to see how they came up with it. You know, this is new to me. Jerry explained it very well, I think, where they were trying to get them all on the one page, on the old one. Did they start with the old one? You know, I'd like more information.
Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with more information. I definitely can use more information. I am concerned though that we kept advertising this as the same old matrix, but it's doing some things that it's obviously, if we took the old matrices that we had and we just gave everybody 5%, they'd be at a different amount now than they would on this. So this is it's doing more than just increasing, which makes it a whole new matrix, which again, we had agreed we need one. We just agreed that it would be done by an outside party, a professional, because somebody who's smarter than I am at all of this part. So if you want to wait, then do you have any further comment?
No, I
this
don't.
time?
I just want to get more information from these guys and see how they came up with it and what the matrix was. Were we going to go to one matrix? I mean, that's what I thought we were doing, was we were going to take the old matrix and stay on the old matrix.
We did, but we got rid of the top 6
I mean, I can
of
have
the
back on there,
old
like I said.
because
I
we
can
don't
put it
hire
back on.
anybody at minimum
And my
wage.
understanding that nobody was raised up in grade, right? They all stayed at the same grade.
The grade ones is if,
Longevity.
or the department had moved them, am I correct?
I think so.
Right, like Carrie had changed a couple of grades on hers from where they
Right.
would have been. But that was her choice to put them.
Well, for instance, one BOCC employee was moved up a considerable amount, and the reason given was leadership, but nobody consulted with the BOCC before we moved him up, and that person's like a 20% increase, but we didn't have any input into our own employee.
I don't know what the conversations were on that with anybody, so
Well, I do.
just that it was, that he was left behind.
He was left behind. That's not the one that was left behind in the.
Yeah, but the reasons given on here was for leadership. So part of that would have been longevity, but 20% just seemed, I mean, definitely, we all understand. We got people here who probably are, some of them may be making 20% less than they should be. Timing, I just thought we'd agreed we'd get an outside source to do this. And this seems to be impacting more than I thought it was. But let's go for public, well, we'll just go public. We'll just go around the room because we have one member of the public here. Okay. Any thoughts from you, Cap?
No, it just seems unequivocally a new pay matrix to me, but besides that, I'll defer to the sheriff and undersheriff.
Yeah,
Sure.
I agree. I'm not really prepared for public comment on it yet. I want to do a little more research.
Okay. Future clerk?
Nope, I'll just listen and.
Okay. Sherry, anything else?
Get the wage study done.
Yes. That is the answer.
I would agree with that.
For the last 10, 12 years, I've been preaching that. So, and it'd be nice to have an unbiased look at that. And I think all of us, elected officials, the board, need to come together and have some input in that, but agree that that's what we're looking at. It's going to be unbiased. It's not going to treat anyone unfairly. And like I said before, guys, my employees are worth a lot more than all of yours. I'm not biased one bit. So that's why we need to get that done. And then because this is tearing departments apart and stuff, and we don't need that. We need to work together and get this done. Thank you.
Point. Colleen? Madam Treasurer?
I agree, the wage study needs to be done. I think a good thing that should have been done is maybe put everything on hold until the wage study, so we don't create more of a problem. Everybody's worth something, I do agree. Everybody deserves raises. In our office, longevities were there. There's only been one, because I only have a 2-year and a 7-year. So,
Okay.
that's all I have.
Timmy, anything else you'd add?
Just that, yeah, we weren't trying to do anything deceitful. We were trying to even things up and do what you guys were needing for the audit stuff and whatever, so, yeah,
Yeah,
we're just
the
trying to
audit
get
did
everybody
say
into
that.
one.
Okay.
On our audit, it did say that we needed to
Mm-hmm.
bring that in.
Both audits did.
Yes.
They did, and that's one of the reasons we agreed to a wage study was to do that. So
Right.
I'm gonna save you for last so you can ask questions. Public comment?
So, the question for Mrs. Zimmerman, when you started this last meeting about the thing, you said they were raising for inflation?
No,
I believe that's the word you used when you said that was your goal.
no, what we're trying to do is catch up from the raises before, because this side,
I'm just going off the words
Yeah.
that you said at the beginning of the meeting. That was,
Yeah, I
inflation
did-
would be a cost of living in my understanding.
no, this
That was
is
the
supposed to
same
go, this is supposed to even us out from what happened. You know, we can't, there's no way we could catch inflation for sure, so, yeah.
But for
Maybe I
this,
misunderstood.
for this matrix that we have here, if we're not gonna be able to do it the correct way, it seems like you could just go back to your old one, because the new one, all they did was take the hourly wage and give it a 3% increase. That's what this is. It's exactly 3%. So if you just did a minimum of 3%, you could have 3% on all the people that we're doing, and they could stay on their same matrix as they are, and you could give them at least a minimum of 3%, and it wouldn't change anything, because it would keep the same matrix that you're doing. And I understand why you took off the top, whatever, 6 brackets. I think you probably should keep those on just in case, because I have a feeling you're gonna have employees in the future that poll workers, all these other people are gonna have lower wages. And if you can't hire them, you'd have to create a new matrix in itself just to give them a wage that's gonna be lower than what your highest one is right now that you're paying your people. That's why those lower wages are there. You might not use them, but you'll probably use them sometime in the future for piddly stuff. If you got a toll attendant or whatever it is, it'd be a lower wage, and then you'd have to create a new matrix in itself just to do that. And then my last question is the longevity. How do you guys actually project that? Is if it longevity, is it years of county service, or is it?
That'd be a good question for the deputy clerk.
Yeah, it is. It's so from 1 to 4 years you're in this.
That is, but say if I'm a maintenance guy here and I work for 8 years and then I come to the assessor's office to be an appraiser, does my 8 years still count?
I believe so. That's the way I read it. Is that, yes, your time at the county is what your longevity
That would be my
is.
question, because some agencies do it that way, some agencies don't. I would project that you don't cut their wage, but they should. 8 years of experience in an engineer is different than working as a maintenance guy. So those 8 years you're getting the longevity for is because of the experience in the position, not the other way around. So if I'm a clerk and I've been working here for 20 years and you put me into a supervisory role, now you're putting me at a giant jump up, because now I have 18 years of experience that you're saying into that position, supervisory position. So now you're jumping up 12 different more steps. That's why you're getting a giant increase.
And that could be answered in that study
Mm-hmm.
too. So we're all doing it the same.
So we're all on the
Because
same.
I would think you would need to be able to, if you're going to hire somebody for doing the public audits on the buildings and stuff like that, they would need a little bit more experience. So if they have experience in their job for 5 years, then I would expect that you should be able to hire them on 5 years of experience. But if we don't have a set standard, is it up to the official to set that? So if they have experience in their job and you want to hire them at a set wage, is that okay with the county commissioners? Or do they need to bring it to the board?
I think that's a
You
question
need
we
to
need to consider.
Read your policy book and see how that's set.
I've read it. It
It
doesn't articulate it.
I didn't think so.
No, so it's not set by the county. It's not said that either they can or cannot do it. And I've heard the clerk in the past saying that they're hiring people on because they have experience in their job, and that's not the way to do it. They have to hire them at the lower wage. That doesn't seem to be the case in other people, so I would expect it should be up to the elected official or the agency head, unless the county commissioners are saying right now that is not the case.
I think the county commissioners probably need to think about that. I don't know that it's come up.
No.
Okay. All right, Mr. Prosecutor.
A few points I'll throw out. First, from the budgetary perspective, I would encourage the board and all those affected who are in the room to analyze the increase, not as much through the lens of a percentage of increase, but how much money do you want to allocate within your budget to the raises? Because if you as a BOCC have said within our budget to stay under whatever levy rates we want to ask the clerk to set, we can allocate $100,000 to wage increases, then from there, we may not know the exact percent, but at least we know the budgetary impact. We know we're allocating 100,000, and if that gets us 1%, it gets us 1%. If it gets us 3, it gets us 3. If it gets us 10, it gets us 10. But this is the amount of money that we're allocating within our budget, which is ultimately where the question ends up at the end of all of this. The second point, which I'll address just because it's fresh in our mind, because Mr. Gross brought it up, the analysis regarding how to treat longevity for certain employees has essentially two components. There's a black and white component that says this employee has been in this position for this number of years, and that's the easy question to ask, right? If an employee is in a certain position and they've been in that position for 10 years, but they were left behind on longevity and maybe they didn't get that bump from the 5-year to the 10-year mark, that's a really easy question to be able to answer. You look at it and say, should they actually be in this different category for longevity based upon their years of experience? The part of the analysis that's not black and white is the BOCC, and I would argue through advisement and consultation with whoever the elected or department head is overseeing that employee, always retains the ability to give merit or credit to certain years of service that you deem appropriate. Really good example of this that I was just informed about actually occurred at the federal government level. A close friend of mine took a position to leave private practice as a federal defense attorney to become part of the federal defense system. So they went from the private sector to the public sector. That attorney has 25 plus years of experience, none of which was public entity experience. To get that employee to sign on board to become a public employee now and tell him he's going to start off at the entry level year 1 of experience would be a non-starter. They would never be able to convince that employee to switch over to the public sector. So part of the negotiations that occurred and part of his contract was he was given credit by the governing body for the years of experience he had, which was equivalent. So he started out maxed out on their pay schedule for longevity because of the years of experience he brought to the table. That's an analysis that the governing body can engage in on a case-by-case basis when analyzing whether or not there's equivalent experience that you want to give credit to that may be gleaned from another department or from another area of work. And that obviously is analyzed individually. And so that's the piece that's not black and white, right? And that's the piece that when a particular department brings an employee to you and says, we would like the BOCC to give credit to this work, you can analyze whether or not that's something you want to provide as part of the incentive for that employee working for a government entity. The last piece that I'll touch on, and I believe that my position in this regard has been consistent throughout the entirety of not only the budgeting process, the wage study process, and now these discussions regarding pay matrices. The determination regarding which employees are like and which employees are similar is not an easy determination to be reached. It's a determination that should be very thoughtful. It should be a determination that is advised through research, data, statistics, etc. In your wage study, I would hope, will provide you with some empirical data that you can rely on in making some of those determinations. Certainly there's a difference of opinion both socially and within our own county structure, between various departments, elected officials, and department heads, of which employees within this county government are similar to which other employees in other departments. Ultimately, that decision gets to be made by you as the VOCC after you analyze certain factors. Jerry may have a chief deputy in his office that requires a certain degree of education as a prerequisite to be able to work in that position. It requires a certain degree of experience, that requires a certain degree of continuing education, classes that they have to keep credentials up on, certifications, etc. And Carrie may have a chief deputy in her department that doesn't require any of those things. On paper, there would be a very good argument to look at those two positions and say they are not the same position, even though they may have the same title as chief deputy. And that analysis is a difficult one to reach, and it's a thoughtful one that needs to be backed by research, data, and information. And so my encouragement to the VOCC, the last time we were all at this table discussing the pay matrix, was that it was my position that no changes to employees within the pay matrix regarding their grade level be made in order to equate them to other employees within other departments until you all have that information. And the part that disappointed me in this is that I believe certain adjustments were made to balance out certain employees, and we have not gone through that process. So those are my final comments.
Thank you. Undersheriff?
Nope, I agree with Ben. That's it. Well spoken. Perfect.
Is it a valid vote if you voted on something you didn't vote on? If you didn't think it was more than 1% or whatever, and you voted that it was 1%, and it wasn't, is that a valid vote?
Yeah, I think we'd have to repeal it, which the commissioner has mentioned. We should wait until there's all three of us here. So
I don't know, repealing it, or is it a valid vote in itself?
I think it's a valid vote. I mean, we could argue whether I was misinformed or misunderstood. So I think the proper way to do that would be, as Commissioner Zimmerman has mentioned, he would like more input, and then we can reconsider it if we want to do that. But Josh, let me give you questions or comments.
So I have a question. How much money, total new money, was paid out for these raises? So everybody who got a raise, what was the total new money that you guys gave out? Is that $7,700?
Is it 145,000 or something like that?
For the year.
For the year, but
levy for the year.
But for this last, for what you guys did when you made the change
It
last
was
week?
budgeted in, it was approved at budget time to do this, and we stayed under that. I think we were at
I don't know what the amount would be for this pay period, if that's what you're.
For pay period.
For this period?
I have no idea.
Okay, because I think that, you guys saying that you're gonna stay under that 148?
Oh, by a lot.
Okay. I guess the other part of this is, why was there such a rush to do this last week when it seems like not everybody was on the same page? Like I said last week, I don't want anyone to think that I'm not pro raise here, because that wage study is going to come back and tell everybody that they're underpaid anyway. Like, I think everybody knows that. But there was a rush on it to get it done last week instead of taking the time to do the things, to have maybe the conversations that Ben just mentioned. What was the reason behind the rush?
Because the clerk's office thought that it was all good and we were moving forward, and then there was questions that got brought up, and payroll was approaching.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, hey, are we doing this or not doing this? So that, payroll could move forward.
Was in limbo.
So.
And I guess.
Yeah, just like Commissioner Doe said, misunderstanding, miscommunication, whatever. We thought we were good to go, and then they went, hey, wait, no, this doesn't seem right. It's not what we thought it was. So we have to go back over it again. And now we still don't not what they thought it was, I guess.
Okay.
So we're researching it more.
So in this last piece here is more of a statement, but just to point out, as a person who uses words for a living, and this is the dirtiest word of them all to use in this, it's really easy to manipulate. At no point saying we're going to give everybody a minimum 1% raise and then there's going to be some longevity. To see or hear the number 20%, knowing that like, well, the minimum was 1, and not include that there might be some employees who see 5, 10, up to 20. I think that could have been clearly communicated and it wasn't. Because I can say, you know, everyone's gonna get a minimum $1 and then, you know, hand out a $100 bill to somebody, and that makes me look like a jerk. When I told everybody else, you know, minimum $1, maybe a little extra for some people based on longevity, but to wax all the way to 20 without just saying it. I think if that had been said in that meeting last week, truthfully, I think if that had been said, some might get 1, some might see upwards of 20, I think the brakes would have been popped. That's just my honest opinion, because I think that's where the commissioners would have gone, well, we probably need to take a look at how this is equaling out and who's getting what, even if it is to balance it out. So.
Okay. Okay. Well, I said it once, Josh will say it again. You made a suggestion last week. I should have taken it.
Probably don't want that on the record.
No, it's on the record, yeah. It's a one-time event in our life.
All right.
Okay. All right. We've heard from everybody in the room, and Commissioner Zimmerman has suggested we delay any changes or decisions or future decisions until we have more time to gather info. So
Yes. Yeah.
I think at that point, then we're stopping with no action.
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Can I ask a question?
Oh,
Sorry. So what was turned over to the clerk is in place for October's payroll. So what do we go back and tell our employees? Is it maybe being taken away for November? Or are they gonna continue to get what they're getting in October, or did they just get a bonus, or?
I think you could honestly state that everybody will be getting an increase over last year. Whether that's what they got on this paycheck or that's some other percentage, that about all we could guarantee. About all we could tell them honestly at this point is we did set money aside in the budget. There is money for an increase. They are going to get an increase. It may or may not, in my mind, it may or may not match what they got this month. Okay.
So, check we get tomorrow. It's not gonna, it might not be the check they get at the end of November for their Christmas shopping and stuff.
This is why I wanted to take action today, but yeah.
Well, it'd be too late for tomorrow's.
Or it's too late for tomorrow's, but yeah, we could, before people got used to it, we could have.
Because the average employee's gonna look and say, oh, I got $100. And then the check they get at the end of November, they do their Christmas shopping then. Oh, now I gotta raise it $10. So.
Well, right now, if we'd have gone with my suggestion, half the people in the building would have got a further increase, and half would have, because I was picking the average. So, but we're not doing anything. So about all we can say is that we are intent on giving an increase.
So I did lie. I'm not done talking. I apologize. If you guys are going to wait for this wage study and then redo all of this, why wouldn't it just be prudent to just do the average if you're going to redo this as soon as the wage study comes out? Because you're going to bring everybody up once that wage study comes in and you have, I think the word Ben used was empirical data to do these things, and then you can take that hard look You guys set aside $148,000. You could give people an average of 5%. That is an increase, whether it serves them best or like, you know, highlights their 10-year longevity here. Like odds are, like I said before, you're not going to be able to do that. Even when you do get the wage study, you're probably still going to be underpaying certain people. So wouldn't it make more sense to just throw 5% at everybody and wait for that wage study instead of the confusion and uncomfortableness of the situation you now find yourself
So
in?
what about the person that's already making 5% more? I make 5% more than he does, and now we're both getting a 5% increase. And so when we go to catch it up, now we got 10%.
Is it 10% or is it still just 5%?
Well, the money is bigger.
Sure. But then at least
So-
you've got the empirical data in my mind that would go, okay, so you got this
You're not
raised,
bridging the gap.
but you're not going to cut anybody's pay when this wage study comes out, I would assume. Like you're not going to cut anybody's pay. And if you're coming in under that 148,000, you would still have money left over in your budget to adjust those appropriately, or at least more to bridge the gap once you have the data. You give everybody 5%, they're fine. A raise is a raise is a raise. You know, like anyone who sees that they got a 5% raise is probably gonna be pretty happy because at least they got it. And then the promise, because that's not dangling a carrot anymore. You guys have officially said, if it hadn't been for that company not doing the wage studies anymore, you would probably already have it done, correct? So it's not a dangle carrot. You guys are actively trying to fix this. So instead of long-term, short-term, all these different things, coming up with a new system that is attempt at going back to an old system, but with the data and the numbers we have, it's essentially a new system. Couldn't you just go flat rate with the promise that once this wage study comes out, then we're going to take a look at everybody's position and see if we can map it out across the board and make it even, instead of temporarily adjusting to temporarily adjust. I don't know. It just seems like you guys might be creating more work for yourselves, honestly, knowing that you have this money that you've already set aside. You're going to bridge the gap one way, but now you guys are going to bridge the gap to bridge the gap. At least that's the way it sounds.
Okay. Good point. All right. So did that answer your question? It's not a great answer, but the answer is yes, we set aside money for raises.
I just didn't know if it was gonna change in November due to what you guys decide at a later date. If you guys decide to go 1% or 3% or do nothing at all, is everyone gonna go back down what they're seeing in October?
I don't think anybody's talking about doing nothing at all. So
Right.
whether it goes with what they're getting this month or some other flat rate, as
So
I've
they may
suggested,
be adjusted next month.
they may be adjusted.
They may have gotten a little extra at this time, and they may be adjusted down to.
And some people may have got less and will get more.
1% or 5%, whatever it be. 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I think we've confused the world enough for one day. Meeting adjourned.
All right.